Our final speaker is that rare beast, a person who is a heavy tech expert, who is also very interested in human behaviors and human societies and values. She is the executive producer for the massively multiplayer science fiction role-playing game EVE Online at CCP Games. She was the co-founder of the Geek Girl Meetup, series of meetups for women in technology. In a previous life, she worked as the producer of the previous speaker's Emmy-winning project, The Truth About Marika. She was meant to speak here last year, but had to cancel her talk because of the very excellent reason of having a baby. Congratulations. Now she's here from Reykjavik, Iceland. Please welcome Andie Nordgren.
Hi. So, I'm Andie Nordgren, and I have been designing for participation in projects and organizations for almost 15 years now. And for the last 5 years or so, four and a half years, I've been in Reykjavik, Iceland, working on EVE Online, which is a massively multiplayer online virtual world, I would say. For those who know it, it's known for being one shared world, hundreds of spaceships, 7,000 solar systems, thousands of player corporations, hundreds and thousands of players, and it's been going for 11 years. So this is very much a magic circle, a rather large human institution, and there would be many, many stories to tell about this game in particular, but what I want to talk about today instead, and the players sometimes make news as well. What I want to talk about today instead is some of my experience with trying to take design tools for participation into organizations and institutions where these perspectives may not be the starting point. And I think this is true for most of us. We have started learning about some of these ways of thinking, we've picked up some of the methods, maybe we use them in our own practice, but very often we need to deal with people or institutions that don't start there. And I think some of the talks during this conference has also reflected just such journeys. And when I meet organizations and people, it seems that many of them are on a similar journey. And I want to talk that through a little bit and see if it's also helpful for you to maybe diagnose a little bit where you are and where your organization is. Because I believe that for all of the methods and knowledge that is available about how we can design for participation and experiences to actually come into play and be useful, we need to move our focus to a place where we're all solving the same kind of problems. Because otherwise, you're very, very likely to just get a lot of resistance from people who don't understand why all of these ideas you come with are in any way relevant to what you are doing. So, I will start in software development, because that is my field, but I think the same applies to many other places. So, it usually starts with something like this. Whoops. People, in terms of focus, have their thing. And so in the software development world, that is usually the software I make. And here's the developer. And the kind of design questions that are at play are things like, what features should it have? And what problems does it solve? And how can I build it? And of course, today, few people work alone, so it's more like a team of people that are sitting with these questions. And I think you can compare this to a lot of other things. If this is our library, for example, what should be in our library? What should we have there? And you know, what problems are we solving in our library? And how can we make that work? And this perspective is not wrong per se, but what a lot of people have discovered is that with this focus, you can get some pretty interesting design results. Because what you discover pretty quickly is that the people who make the thing are not necessarily the same as the people who use the thing. And so unless you change your perspective, you might get something that's made for you and that clashes in interesting ways with the people who are actually meant to use it. And taking a step away from this perspective is something that is happening in a lot of places. You have people with user experience design, for example, who show up and basically say, hey, there are these users that are going to use your thing, and maybe you should think about them. And we have a lot of methods for that. And maybe your design questions should look more like this. Like, what does the user want? What do they need? What kind of problems do they have? And how can the thing we make support the user in reaching their goals? And there's a whole tool set around this in software development. You get things like user stories, which are basically ways to express requirements on software from the perspective of the person who's going to use it, instead of from the perspective of the technology, for example. And when I found these perspectives, which is now probably 10 years ago, I thought this was fantastic. And it felt like a big revolution for me. And for many, many companies and organizations, this in itself is a huge revolution. And many people are struggling to just get from that previous focus to this focus. And I would suspect that many of you who are sitting here are somewhere in this struggle. So then, and to help you here, you get things like user-centric design, user testing, user journeys. These are all methods for defining better and working with what the user goals are and how to help them and so on. And there are even methods where, to be really good at this, you need to kind of take your team and actually move them to meet users and follow them in what they do. And I think some of you have done that and worked with those methods, meeting creatives who live in Landskrona, or talking directly to users of some software or a service. And there are tools like personas, where you create some representation of the different types of users that you have, so that you can easily work with them internally, and so on and so forth. So there's a fantastic toolbox here. And even if you're not in software design, I really recommend to look up some of these tools, because they can be used in almost any context to better understand and learn about the person who is going to use your thing. But then, a few years ago, I ran into a blog by author and programmer and teacher Kathy Sierra. And it's a blog that's about creating passionate users. And you can find it on this URL. And if you want to find her, she's on Twitter as Serious Pony. And she wrote something there that became a sort of turning point for me. And so I want to quote it in full here, in steps. She wrote, "Users shouldn't think about you. Do you care what your users think of you? Stop it. Our best advice for creating passionate users is care only about what your users think of themselves as a result of interacting with your creation." And she made this kind of picture to illustrate what kind of position shift this could mean if you are like selling a product, or if you're making a thing, where the old way is kind of like, hey, we kick ass, you should come and, interact with the thing we have because, we're awesome. Shifting that to, hey, we want you to be awesome, so come and be with us. And this kind of made me go like, shit. Because when I looked at so many of the things that I had been involved with, even when we were really immersed in all of this user-centric methods and so on, we were completely obsessed with ourselves. And I had sat in so many discussions about what should our brand be? What should it express about us? What do we want, like, our thing to be? Our culture house should be this, or our internet service should be this, or whatever it was that I was making or making with people or what they were doing. Somehow we got stuck on ourselves. And so this became a kind of embarrassing revolution for me, and a kind of nasty lens to put on a lot of things that we were doing. But the reason that I bring it up here is that I also find that this focus on our own thing blocks us from taking a necessary step that we kind of have to take to be effective in designing for participation. Because if we can't get beyond ourselves and our thing, even if we're thinking about the users, it's kind of hard to transfer your focus to where we actually need to be when designing for participation, which is with the people in relation to each other. And there's another quote from her as well, which is like a test that you can use from now on. Like, how do you know when you're successful at getting over yourself? And this is when users talk about themselves instead of you. This is a little test that you can use now. But there is this problem that user is still a word, and whether it's visitor or attendee or customer, whatever it is that you use in your context, it's a word that defines a person in relation to your thing. And of course they are. That's why you care about them. It's not that it's like some crime to call people users or attendees. But if we don't have this perspective that we need to kind of get over ourselves and think about our users, this vocabulary, it kind of draws us there. It kind of makes it easier to get stuck on our thing because we think about the people we're dealing with in relation to our software, our museum, our library, our service, whatever it is. So, in my experience and opinion, to design for participation, we need to shift our design focus to participants in relation to each other. And after being at this kind of conference for 2 days, this should sound pretty obvious to us. But in my experience, this is not at all obvious to most people that I encounter and try to work with. Even people who work on some pretty interactive and immersive projects. Even people who work on services that are designed to be social. So what does it mean to shift design focus to there? Well, first of all, it means that your thing, whatever it is, has even less space in the picture. Because when we move focus to the participants with each other, we need to become a facilitator, not the thing in focus. And the design questions change to questions about making people understand what their agency is. If they're going to participate in something where their actions affect the experiences for other people, and where the experience actually is defined as something that you experience with other people, then you need to understand, what can I do? And you need to understand, what can others do? And how do others perceive me and my actions? And things like, how can my actions affect others? And these are simple participatory design questions. And I think you can see how there's not much room for those questions in the previous 2 ways of focus. If you are extremely busy thinking about your users, visitors, customers in relation to your thing, there's not a lot of space and time to think about these questions. And often we don't kind of get there. And it can feel a bit depressing because that huge leap to just be user-centric, it's basically not enough. You have to make this kind of third leap to be participation-centric, in my opinion, to be really effective at this. And so it is this focus shift journey from just kind of blindly caring about our thing, our game, or whatever, to including the users in your mental model of the world, and shrinking your own presence, to shrinking your own presence even more and really moving the design problem to what are the participants experiencing with each other. And it is my hope that this kind of simple model can give you a tool for a little bit of self-diagnosis for the context that you are going back to work in now. Because I can tell you it's going to be extremely hard if you have a whole institution that's kind of over here and taking baby steps to get here, and you show up with like 10 exciting methods that are about designing for participation. People won't be able to follow you. And so it might be that your first challenge is to go from here to here, or your first challenge is to just introduce the idea that the design problem that you should be working with is something different. And depending on what context you're in, it's not always that you should take a full step here. And very, very often, these methods are an absolutely necessary building blocks to get to here, to get to something here. Because if you have a game or a service, if your interface is unclear, if for the things that I can do, it's not clear to me how to do them, or like I can't find the button to click, or I can't find where to go in the building. Obviously, these basic interaction patterns need to be well made for people to even begin to participate. We've talked about the kind of hierarchy of needs, and if people are confused, they're not going to have a good experience with each other. So this toolbox is fantastic, but this is what I'm kind of here to tell you, that this shift is not enough. You need to go one step further. So I would say that if you are coming to a context now where this design perspective is not the starting point, you have two kind of big tasks to be able to move in with these kind of methods and have people actually understand why the hell you're bringing up some immersion, magic circle stuff. Why are these tools even useful? You need to do these two things. You need to help your context move the design focus to level 3, and also to drop the institutional ego and really move the perception of what is important to much less of a focus on yourself and your thing. And to just give some very, very simple examples of what we have done in my context to do those two things, I just have some quick examples. To move the design focus on EVE Online, we have gone and named some of the key roles in how you participate in the game. So instead of just talking about players now, we can talk about different roles that people take in the participatory structure in the game. So we've named, for example, a role that we call enablers, and these are people who do groundwork to make something bigger happen. So this can be someone who basically prepares thousands of spaceships for the war in the game. And then we found another role that we call instigators, who are people who come up with big goals and ambitions and turn around to other people and inspire them to join. And this can be an effort to take over a region of space or something like that, or build the biggest ship in the game. And just by naming these roles, we've been able to start designing for them in a more clear way. And I wanted to use that as an example because maybe it helps you if you can name. That's one way to shift the design focus, right? Where it often doesn't work so well to just come and tell people like, hey guys, we need to shift our design focus, because what does that mean? But if you can take some concrete methods and tools from the participation design toolbox and just kind of put some stakes in the ground, it will help people kind of move their thinking space and design space. And another thing that we've done in the line of dropping institutional ego, I mean, sometimes it's really small and simple things. So we looked at our trailers and for the game EVE Online, and at the beginning of every trailer, we show our company logo. So before you get to see the actual stuff that you came to see, for example, because a friend linked to you this cool spaceship video that we made, we're going like, no, pause. First, we're going to look at us. Here's our logo. And this perspective and filter of, get over yourself has helped us just fix kind of small things like this and really make it about the person and not about us. And we have also shifted our thinking for our brand for the game, for example, from working a lot to make our brand have our game look cool, to have our brand work to help players look cool for playing our game. Simple shifts that can have a big, big difference. And so I hope that by thinking in this kind of model, you can find examples in your world where you can basically move in this direction so that the tools that you've heard about for 2 days here can become actually useful. Thank you.